The moment the human asked if the torture test had even started, every alien in the room realized their medical database was a lie. 300 meters above the proving grounds, Commander Vorse pressed his membrane-covered receptors to the viewport. 11 species, 27 recruits. All standing at attention for the morning's evolution. All except one. The human was fiddling with his footwear again. "Is that the fourth time?" asked his aide, a nervous Valian named Tess. "Fifth," Vorse clicked. "Before breakfast, after breakfast, before roll call, during roll call, and now?" Tess's eye stalks curled in confusion. "Professor, is it possible the human's boots are defective?" "His boots are standard issue, same as every other cadet." The others managed to tie them once and move on with their lives. Down in the training yard, recruit Jake Marlow finished retying his boots, bounced twice on his toes, and grinned at nothing in particular. By Galactic standards, he was forgettable. Medium height, medium build. Brown hair sticking up in 6 wrong directions. His uniform fit like it had been borrowed from a larger, more serious person. What the Galactic database didn't note was the way he moved. Vorse had been watching for weeks. Jake Marlow never stumbled, never hesitated. When he walked, his weight shifted exactly when and where it should. When he turned, his center of gravity stayed perfectly balanced. It was the unconscious grace of a predator who had never needed to think about being a predator. But Vorse kept that observation to himself. For now. "Today," boomed lead instructor Thrax, his throat pouch inflating with authority, "you will enter the Crucible of Limits. This course measures your species' absolute ceiling for agony, endurance, and mental collapse." Several cadets shifted nervously. The Crucible was legendary. A hell loop of heat, cold electrical torture, crushing pressure, and sensory darkness, all calibrated to stop just short of permanent damage. Across the Academy's 400-year history, only 7 cadets had completed the full course without requesting early termination. Those 7 were now flag officers, war heroes, and legends. "You will proceed individually," Thrax continued. "Each test adjusts to exactly 87% of your documented pain threshold. Maximum learning. Minimum death." Jake raised a hand. Thrax paused. No one interrupted the briefing. In 17 years as lead instructor, no cadet had ever raised a hand during the Crucible orientation. "Yes, Cadet Marlow?" "Quick question." Jake's tone was the same one he used to order coffee. "Whose numbers are you using for that 87%? Because humans have this thing where we can't agree if something hurts a little or a lot. We made these little face charts, and frankly, I never know if I'm a crying face or frowning face with extreme prejudice. Pain is just information with bad delivery." Commander Vorse's receptors quivered. Tess whispered, "The human appears to be questioning the scientific method." "The human appears to be stalling," Vorse muttered. But something in his hindbrain was already stirring. He'd reviewed the human medical database before this class started. Category 4 pain tolerance? Middle of the pack, unremarkable. But Jake Marlow had been unremarkable in every measurable way. And yet here he was, asking questions that no one else had ever thought to ask. Down below, Thrax's pouch cycled from red to confused orange. "The database is 3 centuries old." "It is accurate." Cool, Jake nodded. "Just checking." The first recruit stepped forward, a Draxian named Kovac, a warrior species famous for eating agony for breakfast. The Draxian homeworld had surface temperatures that would liquefy most carbon-based life. Their pain receptors had atrophied over millions of years of evolution. Kovac entered the heat chamber. Temperature spiked to 147 degrees Celsius, a precise 87% of the Draxian limit. He exited in 4 minutes, breathing hard but standing. Impressive by any reasonable standard. Vorse made a note. One by one, the others followed. A Eurelian crystal being made it through with barely a flicker, but crystal beings didn't feel heat the way organics did, so that was expected. A Furin cadet survived the cold phase by sheer fury, emerging with frost on her fur and murder in her eyes. A Velian like Tess lasted only 90 seconds in the pressure chamber before tapping out, which was also expected. Velians were thinkers, not fighters. Then it was Jake's turn. He walked to the heat chamber with his hands in his pockets. Actually in his pockets. Like he was window shopping. "Remove your hands," Thrax barked. Oh yeah, sorry. Jake pulled them out, gave them a little shake, and stepped inside. The doors sealed. The temperature climbed. 50 degrees Celsius, 80, 100, 120. Inside, Jake tilted his head like he was examining an interesting stain on a wall. He scratched his nose. He looked at the ceiling. He yawned, not a dramatic yawn. Just a small, quiet yawn, the kind someone makes when they've been standing still for too long. 145 degrees Celsius, the doors opened. Jake walked out, face slightly pink, hair now defying gravity in 7 directions. No limp, no gasp, just a thoughtful expression. Time, Thrax announced, confusion leaking into his voice. 6 minutes, 10 seconds. Sorry, Jake called up. I was waiting for it to get uncomfortable. Are we starting now? The training ground went silent. Vorse's receptors went rigid. Beside him, Tess's datapad slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. Neither of them moved to pick it up. That was the test, Thrax said slowly. Oh, Jake looked genuinely surprised. Okay, what's next? What came next was the ice bath. The previous recruit, a frostborn Varl, had exited shivering and cursing in 3 languages. The Varl species evolved on a planet where winter lasted 11 standard years. Cold was their birthright. And even he had struggled. Jake stepped in, crossed his arms, and started humming. Minus 20 degrees Celsius, minus 40. Jake shifted foot to foot. Little brisk, he said. Minus 55 degrees Celsius. The water should have been freezing solid. Special additives kept it liquid, but the cold was absolute. Jake's lips turned blue. His teeth chattered. His fingers went pale. But he was smiling. That's actually refreshing. Do you rent these out for personal use? Professor, Tess said, typing frantically. I'm cross-referencing the human database. The pain entries appear to be self-reported. Vorse's receptors froze mid-quiver. You mean humans told us how much things hurt, and we just believed them? Yes, sir. And humans are notoriously bad at self-assessment. They underreport danger and overreport capability as a cultural norm. It's a documented psychological bias called the Dunning-Kruger effect, crossed with something called toxic positivity and a general cultural aversion to appearing weak. Also, she added, her voice dropping, the volunteers for the original pain studies were paid, which means they were probably the humans with the highest natural tolerance to begin with. The ones who needed money badly enough to subject themselves to experimental pain protocols. We are idiots, Vorse said flatly. I would not phrase it that way, Professor. I would say we were victims of incomplete data and human cultural opacity. That's the same thing. Yes, Professor, it is. The electrical station was next. Jake placed his palms on the contact plates. The current fired. His entire body locked up, muscles stood out like cables. His jaw clenched so hard Tess thought she heard enamel cracking. Then he laughed. Okay, Jake said through gritted teeth, now we're talking. This is like that time I grabbed a fence on my uncle's farm. The pulses continued. His body jerked and spasmed, but he didn't let go. Most species broke contact immediately, their survival instincts overriding any training. Jake held on like it was a handshake he was determined to win. Why? Vorse whispered. Why would anyone do that? I have no idea, Professor, Tess replied. But he appears to be enjoying himself. When the current stopped, Jake shook out his hands and rolled his shoulders. Phew, what's the voltage on that thing? Because I'd like one for my quarters. Works better than coffee. Thrax looked at his datapad, opened his mouth, closed it, and finally said, moving on to the pressure chamber. The gravity field ramped up. 2G, 3G. Jake's knees bent. His breathing turned shallow. He dropped to one knee, then both knees. His hands pressed flat against the floor. For a moment, it looked like he was about to collapse. Finally, Vorse breathed. Actual distress. Then Jake started doing push-ups. Those are a human conditioning exercise, Tess explained, her voice hollow. He's treating 3 times normal gravity as a gym session. That's the opposite of how biology works. Yes, Professor. Gravity is supposed to crush things. That's what gravity does. Yes, Professor. He should be immobilized. His organs should be struggling. His blood should be pooling in his lower extremities. All of those things are happening, Professor. He simply doesn't care. The pressure released. Jake stood up, panting but grinning. Sweat dripped from his chin. His face was red, but he was already walking toward the next station. Great workout, water break? No breaks in the Crucible. Right, forgot. The final test was sensory isolation, a sealed tank. No light, no sound, no sensation. Most beings began screaming internally within minutes. The Academy's record for endurance was held by a Zen-like Peruvian monk who had lasted 22 minutes through meditative techniques developed over 60 years. Jake climbed in, the lid closed. 5 minutes passed, 10, 15. His heart rate is decreasing, Tess observed. It's approaching resting levels. Impossible. Isolation causes stress. The absence of sensory input triggers panic responses in all documented species. Apparently not in humans, Professor. 20 minutes. 25, Professor. I think he might be falling asleep. At 32 minutes, exactly 87% of the recorded human threshold, the tank drained. Jake sat up, blinked, and yawned. Oh, sorry. Did I doze off? That was super relaxing. Thrax stared. Instructors stared. Other cadets, who had barely survived their own runs, stared. Kovac the Draxian looked like someone had just told him that gravity was optional. Cadet Marlow, Thrax said slowly. The sensory deprivation chamber put you to sleep? It was quiet, dark, and warm. That's literally nap conditions. Do I fail if I fell asleep? Because that seems like a weird rule. They thought they were testing our limits. They were testing our patience. Up in the observatory, Vorse's receptors had gone completely limp. What does the database say? Tess read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. Humans demonstrate moderate pain tolerance. Category 4 out of 10. Notable weaknesses: temperature and pressure sensitivity. Psychological fragility noted during isolation. Recommended training modifications: avoid extremes, provide regular positive reinforcement, limit exposure to stressful stimuli. Category 4, Vorse repeated. That human just completed a Category 9 gauntlet without visible distress. He did push-ups during the pressure test. He fell asleep during isolation. Yes, Professor. He fell asleep. Yes, Professor. In the torture tank. I believe the official terminology is sensory optimization chamber, but yes, Professor. He fell asleep. Down below, cadets were protesting. Kovac the Draxian, who had never lost his composure in recorded history, was shouting, "This isn't fair! How are we supposed to compete with that?" He did push-ups in the pressure chamber, push-ups. Jake held up his hands, looking genuinely confused. Hey, everyone did great. I'm sure you all found it just as easy. We did not find IT easy, the Dorathian roared. We found IT agonizing. Oh, Jake's face fell. Oh man, I'm sorry. Was I supposed to be pretending it hurt? The training ground erupted. Cadets shouted in 7 different languages. One of the Eurelians began emitting a high-pitched frequency that shattered 3 nearby windows. Thrax's throat pouch cycled through colors that weren't in the standard galactic spectrum. Up in the observation deck, Vorse made a decision. He pulled up the human section of the medical database and began typing a formal request for revision. 3 weeks later, Vorse had developed what humans would call a nervous twitch. Every time he saw Jake in the hallway, his receptors spasmed. Jake always waved, completely oblivious to the existential crisis he'd caused. The emergency faculty meeting was packed. Every instructor who had ever worked with Cadet Marlow was present. So were several who hadn't, but had heard the rumors and wanted to see if the rumors were true. Thrax stood at the front, his throat pouch cycling through colors no one had ever seen. The tactical combat simulations start next week, Thrax announced. We need to discuss the human situation. What situation? Asked Professor Mellis from weapons training. She was new this semester, having transferred from a sister academy. I've reviewed Cadet Marlow's scores, adequate but not exceptional. His marksmanship is average. His tactical scores are slightly above average. His physical fitness scores are excellent but not record-breaking. What am I missing? Several instructors groaned in unison. You haven't seen him in practicals, said Lieutenant Gorm, the combat instructor. He pulled up a holographic display. His marksmanship scores are average because he gets bored and starts shooting while looking the other way. Last week he hit 6 targets over his shoulder using a mirror. That's impossible. I have video evidence. I watch it every night before bed. I'm still not convinced it happened. Professor Mellis watched the footage. Her antennae went pale. He's not aiming. No, Gorn agreed. He's not. He's just pointing the weapon in the general direction and pulling the trigger. Yes. And hitting the targets. Every single one. How? Gorn shrugged, a gesture he'd learned from observing humans. He says he can feel where the shot needs to go. I asked him to elaborate. He said, and I quote, "You know how you just know where to throw a ball so your friend catches it? It's like that, but with a gun." Professor Mellis sat down heavily. "That's not how ballistics works. I am aware." Thrax continued, "The simulations adapt in real time. They escalate until the cadet fails or retreats. That's the pedagogical model. Find the breaking point, then work backward to strengthen it. So he'll fail or retreat," Mellis said. "What's the problem?" "The problem," Vor said quietly, "is that he might not. What if the simulation keeps escalating and there is no breaking point? What if the human's limit is higher than our simulation's maximum?" The room went cold. Professor Dax from Medical spoke up. She had been silent until now, studying her own scans and readouts. "I ran extensive scans after the Crucible. Jake's pain receptors work fine. He felt everything. The heat, the cold, the electricity, the pressure. His nervous system registered all of it as harmful stimuli." "Then how?" someone asked. "He has a completely different relationship with discomfort. Humans can consciously override survival instincts. They look at something actively harming them and decide the harm is acceptable if it achieves a goal. It's called willpower in their literature. They consider it a virtue to be cultivated." "That's insane," someone muttered. "That's humanity," Dax replied. "They evolved on a death world. Predators, diseases, unstable geology, extreme weather, and a complete lack of natural weapons or armor. The ones who couldn't handle trauma didn't survive. The ones who did created a species that treats adversity as a training drill, pain as information. Fear is a problem to be solved, not a signal to flee." She pulled up a human brain scan. "This is Jake's brain during the electrical torture test. See this region, the amygdala? It processes fear and threat. In most species, it lights up like a star during harmful stimuli. In humans, it activates briefly, then shuts down. The prefrontal cortex, this area, here overrides it. They literally talk themselves out of being afraid." "That's terrifying," Tess whispered. "It is," Dax agreed. "And it's completely normal for their species. Every human has this capability. Most never need to use it, but the ones who do, they can accomplish things that should be biologically impossible." Gorn pulled up another video. "This is from zero-gravity sparring 2 days ago. The screen showed Jake floating in the center of the training sphere. 5 larger, stronger cadets converged on him in a coordinated pincer. 2 Draxians, 2 Furans, and a massive Borlan whose species had 3 times human muscle density. Jake waited until the last second, then pushed off a wall and launched himself directly at the biggest opponent, the Borlan. The collision looked painful. It was for the Borlan. Jake tucked his shoulder, drove it into the Borlan's solar plexus, and used the momentum to spin both of them around. He grabbed the Borlan's harness, planted a foot on his chest, and launched the massive alien directly into 2 of his teammates. All 3 went tumbling. The remaining 2 Draxians hesitated. Fatal mistake. Jake ricocheted off another wall, then another, moving through 3 dimensions like he'd been born in zero gravity. His trajectory made no tactical sense until it did. He hit the first Draxian from below, drove him upward, then used the recoil to change direction mid-flight and catch the second Draxian from behind. In under 90 seconds, he'd neutralized all 5 opponents. "He apologized for winning wrong," someone said faintly. "That's what concerns me most," Gorn replied. "He doesn't understand how abnormal this is. To him, it's just a game. He's playing. The rest of them were fighting for survival, and he was playing. Has anyone told him? We tried. He thinks we're being nice. He has no frame of reference for genuine shock. Every time we compliment him, he assumes we're just being polite. It's a human cultural thing called humility, They're trained from birth to downplay their own abilities. Vorse's datapad beeped. He read the message and felt his receptors droop. The simulations have been randomized. Jake has been assigned to Squad 3, Urban Warfare. Hostage rescue, multiple hostiles, limited ammo, Omega-class difficulty. Reserved for final-year cadets. Every instructor turned to stare at Thrax. His pouch went completely white, a color none of them had ever seen before. That's an unfortunate randomization. We could reassign him, Mellis suggested. On what grounds? We can't tell him he's too capable. That would require admitting we've been testing him with equipment he barely noticed. That would require admitting our entire training methodology is calibrated for species that aren't human. So we just let him go? Vorse looked at the ceiling. We watch. We learn. And we pray that the simulation's adaptive difficulty finds something he can't handle. No one in the room believed that would happen. The simulation zone was a massive holodeck, capable of generating any environment the instructors could imagine. Today it generated a war zone, a residential sector of a mid-tech world, complete with crumbling buildings, smoke-filled streets, and the sound of distant gunfire. Squad 3 consisted of 6 cadets. In addition to Jake, there was Vex the Furin as team leader, 2 Draxian brothers named Kale and Dorn, a Velian scanner specialist named Miri, and a massive Borlin named Toon. Jake volunteered for point position. Point is extremely dangerous, Vex said. First through doors. First to trigger traps. First to get shot. Sounds good, Jake said cheerfully. I like being first. It's exciting. Training weapons still hurt. Oh yeah, I got shot last week. Stung like crazy. Definitely want to avoid that, but if it happens, no big deal. Miri the Velian stared at him. No big deal? Getting shot? Well, it's not fun, but it's just pain, right? Pain is information. I got shot in the left shoulder, so I learned to keep my left shoulder behind cover. Problem solved. The squad entered the simulation. Hostile forces android combatants programmed with advanced tactical AI controlled a residential sector. 12 hostages, according to the briefing. Estimated 20 to 30 enemies. Civilian holograms wandered the streets, adding chaos and moral complexity. Jake took point, moving low and fast. His footfalls made almost no sound. His breathing was quiet and controlled. The other cadets had to strain to keep up with him. Contact, he whispered. 2 hostiles, second floor window, northeast. Vex checked his scanner. I don't see anything. They're behind a curtain. One just moved it to peek out. They're watching the main intersection. Probably have a machine gun mounted on a tripod. Jake proved his point by shooting both hostiles before they could react. The android combatants sparked and collapsed. The machine gun never fired. Huh? Jake said. Guess we're starting loud. Move up, people. What followed wasn't a tactical operation. It was a natural disaster with a human-shaped epicenter. Jake seemed to have a sixth sense for enemy positions, calling out contact seconds before they appeared on scanners, predicting ambush that hadn't been set yet, moving through the urban environment like he'd been fighting in this exact city for years. When combat erupted, he moved with an efficiency that looked almost lazy. No wasted motion, no dramatic poses, just smooth, economical movements that devastated everything in his path. 3 hostiles. Ground floor, behind the blue door. 1 has a shotgun, 2 have rifles. The shotgunner is left-handed, so he'll expose his right side when he turns the corner. How do you know all that? Miri demanded. I can hear them breathing through the door, through combat noise. Also, the left-handed thing is just a guess based on how they're standing. The weight distribution is slightly off. Jake kicked the door open and eliminated all 3 in rapid succession. Weird, must have good ears. He didn't have good ears? He had human ears evolved to detect subtle sounds in noisy environments because missing those sounds meant becoming something else's dinner. But Jake didn't know that was unusual. He thought everyone could hear through doors. The scenario adapted. Enemy numbers increased from 20 to 30 to 40. The androids began using better tactics, flanking maneuvers, suppressing fire, coordinated assaults. The squad found themselves pinned in a 3-story building, surrounded on all sides, ammunition running low. We need to retreat, Kale said. His Draxian confidence had eroded over the past 20 minutes. We can't, Vex replied. The hostages are in the building across the street. If we retreat, they're executed. Jake checked his ammo counter. 5 rounds left? He looked at the tactical display showing enemy positions completely encircling them. Then he smiled a particular smile, the same one he'd worn during the electrical torture. I have an idea, he said. It's probably stupid, but it might work. What kind of idea? The building next door has a window about 20 meters away. If I jump to it, I can flank them from an unexpected angle, draw their attention, give you time to cross to the hostage building. Everyone stared. Cadet Marlow, that's a 20-meter gap. No safety equipment, no gravity assistance. No net, nothing but 20 meters of empty air and a 4-story drop. Yeah, I know. Probably stupid, right? Jake was already moving toward the window, but I did track and field in school. Long jump was my thing. 20 meters is a stretch, but I bet I can make it with a good running start. Absolutely not. That's suicidal. Jake paused. Is it though? Worst case, I'm eliminated from the simulation. Best case, I create an opening for you to escape with the hostages. Mathematically, it's worth trying. The expected value is positive. That's not how you calculate expected value in a life or death situation. It's not life or death, it's a simulation. The worst thing that happens is I get a bruise and a lecture. He backed up, measured his approach, took a deep breath. Tell my story, then he ran. Footsteps thundered on the concrete floor. 3 strides, 5, 7. He hit the window at full speed, glass exploding. Outward around him as he launched into empty space, 20 meters above the simulated ground, time slowed. Every instructor in the observation deck stopped breathing. Tess grabbed Vorse's arm without realizing it. Thrax's pouch went completely transparent. This was it. This was where the human's confidence finally exceeded his capability. This was where physics reasserted itself. This was where Jake Marlow learned that even humans had limits. Jake sailed through the air. His form was perfect, arms extended. Body straight, trajectory arc exactly right. He looked like an Olympic athlete if Olympic athletes routinely launched themselves between buildings during firefights. His expression was absolutely delighted. He crashed through the opposite building's window shoulder first, roll on impact, came up running. Glass showered around him. He didn't slow down. He raised his weapon and immediately eliminated 3 enemy combatants who'd been watching the squad's original position with their backs to him. Made it, he called over the comm. His voice was slightly breathless but calm. Vex, move now while they're confused. I'll keep them busy, the squad extracted across the street, covering the hostages while Jake conducted a 1-person war against 25 enemy androids. His ammunition ran out after the first 10. He improvised. He used furniture as projectiles, chairs, tables, a broken door. He threw objects to create distractions, then moved while the androids tracked the noise. At one point, he literally tackled an android through a wall, using the structural damage to bring down a ceiling on a cluster of enemies. When the simulation ended, Squad 3 had rescued 11 of 12 hostages, eliminated 43 enemies, and suffered 0 casualties. Jake had personally accounted for 36 of those eliminations, including all of the ones after he ran out of ammunition. The AI assessment flashed on every screen. Exceptional performance. Difficulty exceeded parameters. Error in threat assessment. Jake read the display and frowned. Error? Does that mean I did something wrong? Did I break the simulation? In the observation deck, Vorse watched instructors simply stare at the monitors in silence. Someone had started crying. He didn't know who, and he didn't care to find out? He jumped between buildings, someone whispered. He jumped between buildings, someone else confirmed. 20 meters, through a window, while being shot at. He said long jump was his thing. In school, the room descended into chaos. Instructors shouted over each other. Theories were proposed and immediately discarded. Someone suggested running the simulation again with higher difficulty. Someone else suggested sedating Jake and running the simulation remotely. A third person pointed out that sedation probably wouldn't work, given what they'd learned about human pain tolerance and chemical resistance. Vorse raised a hand. The room fell silent. We have no category for what humans are, he said finally. Category 4 is a lie? Category 9 is insufficient? They're not trying to dominate. They're not trying to prove anything. They're trying to fit in. This is Jake Marlow trying to be adequate, trying to be normal, trying not to stand out. The room absorbed this with varying levels of horror. What happens, Dax asked quietly, when we ask them to be exceptional? What happens when we stop testing them with equipment designed for other species and actually challenge them? No one had an answer. 6 months later, Jake graduated at the top of his class. His final scores were exceptional, but carefully modulated instructors had learned to judge him on a completely different scale. They had also learned to adjust the scales themselves, creating new categories specifically for human cadets. At the ceremony, he gave a short speech about perseverance and teamwork, thanking his instructors for their patience with a slow learner like himself. Several faculty members developed sudden coughing fits. Thrax's pouch turned a deep, embarrassed purple. Afterward, Vorse found Jake alone, looking at the memorial wall. The wall honored cadets who had died in training accidents over the Academy's 400-year history. There were a lot of names. Lieutenant Marlow. Jake turned and smiled. Professor Vorse, thanks for everything. I learned so much here. Did you enjoy your time? Absolutely. Challenging and fun. Well, mostly fun. Some parts were definitely challenging. Which parts? The academic coursework. Jake laughed. Memorizing alien species names, their homeworlds, their political structures. Give me a physical challenge any day. My brain just doesn't work that way. Vorse paused. The physical challenges were easy for you? I mean, Jake looked uncomfortable. Not easy. But yeah, pretty manageable. Is that okay to say? I don't want to sound arrogant. No, Lieutenant, that is fine to say. Very fine indeed. Jake looked relieved. Good, I always worry I'm not taking things seriously enough. Some of the other cadets really struggled, and I felt bad that I couldn't relate. Like Kovac cried after the Crucible. Did you know that? A Draxian crying, and I was just standing there like, that was fun. When do we eat? I felt like a jerk. Vorse filed away the information about Kovac crying. That would go in the Draxian file, not the human one. Lieutenant, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think you'll do okay out there, in actual service? Jake's expression shifted just slightly. The easy confidence flickered, replaced by something more genuine, more vulnerable. The training was one thing, but real missions are different. People are depending on me. Real people, not simulations. What if I'm not ready? What if I freeze? What if someone gets hurt because I made the wrong call? Vorse looked at this impossible creature, the one who had rewritten every assumption about physical and psychological limits, who had accidentally caused 3 senior instructors to retire, who had jumped between buildings because it seemed tactically sound, who had fallen asleep in a torture tank, and who was worried he might not be good enough. Lieutenant Marlow, Vorse said carefully, I have been an instructor at this academy for 37 years. I have trained over 2,000 cadets. I have seen heroes and cowards, geniuses and fools, the destined and the doomed. And I have never seen anyone like you. Jake blinked. That's really nice of you to say, Professor. I am not being nice, Lieutenant. I am being accurate. You are not merely adequate. You are not merely exceptional. You are something I do not have a category for. And I suspect that in actual service you will not merely do okay. You will excel in ways that will force the military to rewrite its manuals. That's a lot of pressure. Yes, Vorse agreed. It is, but you will carry it the way you carry everything else. Without seeming to notice, Jake smiled, that friendly, open smile that made him look like the most harmless being in the galaxy. Well, I'll try my best. That's all anyone can ask, right? Right, Vorse agreed. Though privately, he thought that Jake Marlow's best might accidentally result in humanity dominating the entire galactic military structure within a generation, and he wasn't entirely sure that would be a bad thing. Back in his office, Vorse opened his personal files. His final entry read, Humanity remains the most dangerous species in known space precisely because they do not realize it. Their kindness is genuine. Their desire to cooperate is sincere. They genuinely want to be helpful. This makes them trustworthy allies and terrifying potential adversaries. Recommendation: treat humans extremely well. They respond to kindness with loyalty, to friendship with devotion, to challenge with determination. They are not invincible, but they are as close to it as any carbon-based life form has a right to be. Above all, never make them angry. We still have no idea what happens then. And I would very much like to keep it that way. Somewhere across the academy, Jake Marlow was probably getting ready for his first assignment, tying his boots for the 7th time and wondering if he'd remembered enough socks. Be kind to humans, it's our only defense. The universe would adapt to them eventually, or they would adapt it to themselves. Either way, it was going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. Vorse pulled up next semester's files. 3 more human names. 3 more potential category-defying chaos agents. He began making notes on equipment modifications and safety protocol adjustments, stronger gravity simulators, higher temperature ranges, more realistic combat scenarios. It was going to be a very interesting year.